Hello, scumbags. This is Andres Garcia coming to you with another theory from fattyfantheories.com exclusively for Rebel Scum Podcast. Today I'm going to be bringing you a fan theory about the wildly unpopular Midichlorians. As some of you know, Midichlorians were a plot point or a plot device that was introduced in episode 1 as a way of explaining what the Force actually is and why some people have the ability to use the Force more than others. I'm going to try to explain to you why Midichlorians are so important to the overall stories, episodes 1 through 7, and how it affects the major Star Wars characters. Let's begin. When we first hear about Midichlorians, we hear it from Qui-Gon Jinn as he tells a young Anakin that the higher concentration in one's body of Midichlorians means that they are more likely to yield more force power or sensitivity. Going further on this, George Lucas describes Midichlorians as a microscopic living organisms that are in a symbiotic relationship with other cells within the host body. He goes on to say that midichlorians act as sort of a power source for the cells and the Force. Now, George even takes it a step further and describes the midichlorians as they're all being connected. Now, I take this as he is implying that there is some sort of psychic connection between all the midichlorians. But George Lucas's own description of the midichlorians, it sounds like he's more referring to the real-world cellular organisms known as mitochondria. Now, doing a quick wiki, it tells us that mitochondria derive from an ancient bacteria that has evolved and lives within our cells. They're also described as being a sort of powerhouse for the cells that they inhabit. It's also worth noting that mitochondria cannot live in red blood cells, which is the majority of the cells that are in our body, but rather other cells, such as liver cells. So it is impossible for a person to be all mitochondria. If we take this science lesson and we apply it to the logic of midichlorians, right, it is safe to say that a being with more midichlorians could possess more sensitivity to the Force and yield more Force powers. With that said, how does a character in the Star Wars universe having a high amount of midichlorians, how does it affect their lives, and how does it affect the way that they interact with other people in the Star Wars universe? Now, first off, I want to answer a very obvious question that you're all probably thinking to yourself. If these microscopic beings exist in all living things, why are there not more beings using Force abilities? Well, to me the answer is simple, and it is provided by Qui-Gon Jinn. In measuring Anakin's midi count, he tells Obi-Wan that his count rivals that of the strongest Jedi at the time, Master Yoda. This implies that there is some sort of scale in place that if someone has a certain amount, they qualify as a Force user. Of course, the count would have to be very high to qualify. So if Anakin has, let's say, 20,000 midichlorian count, right, which is supposedly as high as Yoda at the time, then someone like Obi-Wan might have 17,000. Now, secondly, I want to answer another question that's always bugged me. Why is it that Force users like Luke, Rey, become so skilled at using the Force in such a short time? Now, to answer this, I actually have to go back to Anakin in episode 1. Qui-Gon Jinn senses that there is something special about the boy, thus his interest in him and wanting to measure his count. Now, if there is a psychic connection as described by George Lucas regarding the midichlorians, then I think it's safe to say that what is happening is Qui-Gon Jinn's midichlorians are reacting to Anakin's midichlorians, thus being drawn to one another. Still though, this does not answer the question as to why characters like Rey and Luke become so skilled with their Force powers in such a short time. Now, it is my theory that when someone who has a very high midichlorian count comes in contact with someone of the same or higher count, they becomes the other person's midichlorians to awaken, right? Now, this is the scene in episode 1 where Qui-Gon Jinn comes in contact with young Anakin. Qui-Gon senses the awakening in Anakin and tells him that he has to listen to them. Now, Anakin displays this, of course, in a way of using Force perception during his pod race. Anakin uses the Force to help guide him to victory. In short, Qui-Gon Jinn's presence awoke the dormant cells in Anakin's body. To further prove my point, regarding this, I want to now jump to episode 4. Before we meet Obi-Wan, we meet Luke, and he is portrayed as your typical kid living on a desert planet with dreams of more. It is not until his chance encounter with R2-D2 that he chose to seek out old Ben Kenobi, a local hermit in the hills of Tatooine. I don't want to go too deep into the story, but after their first meeting, Obi-Wan starts training Luke to use the Force and even display some Force abilities for him to see. This to me is another example of a high-count Midichlorian carrier coming into contact with another high-count carrier and awakening his cells. After Obi-Wan's death, Luke goes to train with the mega high-count Midichlorian being Yoda. Being exposed to Yoda's cells further awakens his own. This explains his giant increase in force powers and fighting abilities in such a short time. Lastly, I come to Rey. Same scenario. Rey is a scavenger living on a desert planet whose life is thrown upside down by a chance encounter with a droid. There is no argument that Rey is force sensitive, but to what level is yet to be seen. However, the above examples still apply to her. Now, I am a strong believer that Finn is a passive Force user, sort of the same way as Leia. I believe that it is her encounter with Finn that jump-started her Force powers and allowed her to be Force-guided and thus pilot the Millennium Falcon out of harm's way. The argument that I've mentioned to you about Finn's being Force-sensitive, so let me just leave that as it is there. What I can prove, though, is that her Force powers did not awaken until later in the movie, and I'm talking about the scene where she is drawn to the lightsaber and she has the Force visions. Before this, she has not exhibited any such abilities. Now, it is important to know that this awakening scene takes place after meeting another high-count Midichlorian carrier, Maz Kanata. It is proven that not only Maz is Force-sensitive, but she is also a Force user. She, of course, would have a higher count than Finn. Again, that's open to interpretation, thus awakening more of her dormant cells. So, now let's skip ahead a little, and it is not until she is in the same room as Kylo Ren, an extremely high Force user, again meaning there's a lot of Midichlorians in his system, that her abilities really awaken. Now she can suddenly do the Jedi mind trick, Force jump, and become extremely skilled with the lightsaber. Now, this is enough to go toe-to-toe with the best Jedi or Sith or whatever you want to call him at the time, Kylo Ren. I hope you all enjoyed this theory, and comments, questions, or feedbacks are always welcome in the comments below. Again, this is Andres Garcia from Fatty Fan Theories, saying adios.
Hey scumbags, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on our video. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rebel Scum Podcast, for all the latest videos.